Uh, a double statement about the great Heideggerian interpreter Hubert Dryfus. Let's say in parentheses SIC. In other words, I am aware that it seems faulty to say that in some sense. For instance, no, but he's a nice man. Zizek on Hubert Dryfus. So I give, as it were, the how's they called in Rousseau, the not testimony, but well, in any case, somehow the confession of faith. That's what the term I was looking for. It seems to me that in reading, I too was of the general view that Dreyfus is not a good interpreter of Heidegger, which has some concrete reason to it, not just the general feel of the way he works. For instance, that he constantly speaks of Dasein as a transcendental entity, in the sense that instead of specific conditions for any possible experience, as with Kant, he just speaks of intelligibility to occur. So he always assigns to the, but that's not what Heidegger says. Heidegger is more open than that. He does not. If that were the case, then we would still be talking about it, something basically like a transcendental subject in the Cartesian sense. So I don't even see how Dreyfus can begin there, since he denies the Cartesian ground. But what Heidegger says is more simple, right? He just says Dasein is that which is not the present to hand, not the contents of things that are present to hand, meaning everything already posited. Already I'm interpreting a very simple statement. So, but on the other hand, what I want to claim is, going back to the Dreyfus thing, is after looking at his work for a longer time, I do see that there's many, he's discovered many things that are worth looking at. So one shouldn't just, because there's some things wrong with it, one should just throw out a baby with the bathwater. So on this issue of the subject and Dasein not being anything to do with the subject, I think we have these terms that we should go into as we go on, staying with the various subject matter simultaneously, so that we're always in this condition where the hooves of bulls are thundering around us, because as though on a narrow Spanish street, running upon us. Dasein is, when thought as something historical, almost Nietzschean. And I think it should show in the highest level of simplicity, but which is also the most encompassing, the distinction between Nietzsche's view, at least Nietzsche's basic view, the part of Nietzsche which seems most stable and most able to access, which I give directly through the quotation that he gives in Truth and in The Uses and Abuses of History, where he cites Bartold Niebuhr to say the only use of history is to show men the arbitrariness of the forms in which they see themselves and the forms in which they insist on others see. That's the encompassing of the wisdom of the so-called Übermensch, or the superhistorical, as it stands simply at the time of that essay, about the time of the close of the Franco-Prussian War. I claim that's the epitome of Nietzsche in one neat statement. That means that any term we had, so say we're talking about the will, and Nietzsche does explicitly criticize philosophers, saying philosophers act as though they know what the will is, that it's a simple phenomena, but when you look into it, it's very difficult, and there's many ways to account for it, and so therefore we can look through it through all kinds of different shapes, all kinds of different geometrical variances. We can try to approach it with those forms, which are the frames of our way of seeing. This criticism of will, however, Heidegger grants. So, in a way, there's a kind of rapprochement with Nietzsche, because Heidegger just says, let's look at it concretely so I can show exactly what I mean. So, if the basic way of analyzing the so-called subject is either consciousness, as with Descartes, or personality, as with the theologians, or the psyche, or the soul, the Platonic psychology, or in Aristotle, this becomes also this sense of the psyche is the form of a living body, so the principle of its motion, basically. So you can see, if we look into that the basic meaning of the second term, personality, which already existed in a way in the first period, persona, of course, sort of this awareness. That's the play of these comic plays that came out probably when Plato was a teenager. Plato probably saw some of them. I'm not sure when the Clouds came out, but some of the other ones, Aristophanes. This is an awareness of the people of this possibility of the assembly of women, for instance. So the awareness of possible different dwellings or ways of life they could be in. This accounts for many things, but we could say in this most simple sense, when we talk about personality, all we're talking about is the center where the will, where certain kind of feelings of different variety, and where sensation comes from, and sometimes one adds intuition, as with Carl Jung's system. That's the simplest sense of personality. Then there's all kinds of other senses of personality, or somebody's character, somebody's distinctive individuality, or personality in the sense that Socrates is the individual or the perfect personality, Christ is the individual or the perfect personality, Zoroaster or Zarathustra as Nietzsche's sort of big Atman to his actual daily small Atman. But you see that personality then takes all kind of content. Psyche, of course, takes all kind of content, Platonic psychology, as I just mentioned. Consciousness then becomes all this, hard problem of consciousness, and is consciousness identical to the world, and blah, 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 all this totally boring stuff, connected to the problem of perception, or how a sense data thing becomes conscious of the world. All those take on a context. So when Nietzsche says, the will, what's that, blah, 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 we can go into that idea and break it down. Heidegger already grants sort of everything on that side of the Bertolt Niebuhr maxim, that it's arbitrary. All we can learn is that it's arbitrary, the forms of which we see things and which we impress upon and insist upon others seeing things. Heidegger seems to go to the 0 point with this, and even beyond the notion of the transcendental as the intelligible, that would be something we'd have to add to the content of his statement. He just says it's that which is none of the concepts or none of the, I'm saying concepts in the sense of the Deleuze-Guattari sense that concept is identical to metaphysics or the whole tradition.